And we are back with another in the Bond cars series, The License to Kill now. And this saw a massive car chase sequence that wasn't actually in a car, they were on lorries, 1989. However, it was right at the end of the film and the absolute climax, and a lot to get our teeth into. By the way, apologies for the very plain, boring background as we can see, rather than my normal my James Bond history, Funko Pops, etc. background, because we're in the process of moving house, so everything's going to look very plain for a while until everything is in the new house and set up. And I'm at university, so of course that also complicates things as well. But anyway, back to this. So Sanchez is of course the main villain of the film, and these trucks, of course, unlike the Aston Martin DB5 or Lotus Esprit or Aston Martin Vanquish or DB9, this has no gadgets on it, of course, no external or internal gadgets. It's just a truck. However, what is full of the truck will interest many drug lords and James Bond fans, because it's of course the main premise of it was petrol and petrol filled with cocaine and crack that they're going to transport across between borders, and once it was melted down it could be a new chemical compound and get the crack and cocaine out of it. That was of course the main premises of the climax, and James Bond was discovered by some of Sanchez's henchmen, and then we have thus arrived at the tank chase where Sanchez really realises who James Bond is, and the fighting does begin to ensue. Now I really do like the climax of this film, particularly because License to Kill isn't the most renowned James Bond film there is. It's definitely not my favourite, but I think the climax is really on the top, which I think is quite good because the film is over 2 hours long, and the film, sort of the rest of the film is a bit average. So if the climax makes you want to stay for the whole time at the end, doesn't it? So that's really quite good. So of course it's really great. I mean, the cinematics are good. There's not too much dramatic change between shots, as we saw say like Quantum of Solace, or it's very nice. There's a lot going on, but the camera's not going mad. It does take each shot of James Bond, Sanchez, the trucks, and his woman in the aircraft, of course dropping the dust as well. So I guess you could argue the plane has something to extra, has dust dropped like a bomb, but it's dust. Of course blinds some of Sanchez's henchmen and then they find it harder to find James Bond because they've got a face full of dust. And the trick's really great. Stuntmen of course are pretty prominent throughout, and they're never the best, are they? At MGM, James Bond disguising the stuntmen, it's pretty clear that it isn't Timothy Dalton, but it looks pretty cool and it looks very nice. That's all good. And of course it's pretty cool when the truck does this and it goes at sort of 45 degree, 50 degree angle to the ground, and then when it slams back down again it destroys one of Sanchez's car. And there's also an RPG / rocket launcher used in this film, which is really terrific. And the explosions are also absolutely amazing, and really great cinematography and setup and design of the crew for this James Bond film, it must most certainly be said. So as the climax of course develops and they lose that car, of course James Bond is then straight on to Sanchez. However, when that car catches up, as well that he realises that of course he can dump some of that petrol after then jumping onto another lorry, leaving his own lorry behind, smashed the window, jumping onto another lorry. There's so much going on here. He then of course pours some of that petrol / weed out, cocaine rather, I don't know my drugs, out of the tanker, and then of course fire and petrol, we all know what happens there, and of course that other car, we all start blowing up with fire, and then that goes off the road and that is dealt with. And then you're on to of course the final climax of the film, the final climax of the climax of the truck car chase sequence / car chase / truck chase, when James Bond and Sanchez of course fighting on that final truck with his machete. Sanchez used the machete to cut of course one of the wires connecting the lorry to the truck, the payload, and of course that disables the brakes, which then of course we'll see later on that leads to James Bond and Sanchez. As the truck goes down the hill, the driver jumps out, of course one of Sanchez's henchmen. The truck goes down the hill, you have another big toss and turnover of the truck, which I think is again just amazing how much the budget of this film must have been. They could literally demolish, like I'm counting 2 trucks already in about 5 minutes of filming. I really respect the crew at MGM for doing that for us, Eon Productions, etc. Big shout out to them, that's fantastic. And then of course we see James Bond and Sanchez covered in petrol and quite bloody faces. However, Sanchez pulls James Bond up, but before we can get the final blow, it is absolutely something that always sent a chill down my spine. Of course, License to Kill is a film all about Felix Leiter and James Bond's relationships. James Bond loses the lighter that Felix Leiter of course gave to him, which is why Sanchez started going over James Bond, and James Bond and Sanchez started fighting in the first place over Felix Leiter's role in of course Sanchez's drug and organisation. And then one last look, that's the last thing Sanchez saw before he died in his life, James Bond lighting him on fire with the cigarette Felix Leiter gave to him, who Sanchez tried to kill Felix Leiter. a truly phenomenal chase to a film that is honestly quite mediocre apart from that. But the truck chase, car chase is absolutely phenomenal. Thank you. Goodbye.